Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you've all been having a really great day at the Social Value Conference. And I think it's about time I introduce myself. If you're thinking who this strange guy is on your screen, my name is Arnab Dutt, and I am the National Policy Champion for Procurement and Social Value at the Federation of Small Business. I've got a fantastic panel, and we're going to talk about SMEs, small businesses which do so much all around the country in really pushing the social value agenda. So forgive me if I'm telling you things you already know. A little recap: 99% of all our workforce is employed by SMEs, who make up 99% of our businesses. Actually, let me come back to you: 67% of our total UK workforce. They deliver social value in their communities, bottom up. And in many areas, we're actually failing to measure that. And we know they employ people furthest from the labour market, more women, more minorities, more underly abled, and from nearly every other disadvantaged group. In fact, these small companies do so much, they probably have a lot to teach our larger companies in deploying social value in our country and in our communities. But there is so much more potential for them to achieve and do more. And we're going to explore a little of that this afternoon: how they might do it better, how they might start their journey. I've got a fabulous panel, and they will tell you about themselves a little bit and about their own social journey, social value journey of why they're here today and how they've got here. So I'm going to start with Katie Corbett. Katie, please introduce yourself.
Hi, so I'm Katie Corbett. I work for Bray Slaughter, which is an SME of roughly about 25 employees. And we're a construction management company that has been operating in Bristol in the southwest for about 125 years now. So I joined the company quite recently in March this year, and it's also when my role was created, partly in response to the Procurement Act 2023, but also we tender and work a lot with local authorities. So social value is coming up as a weighted criteria quite often for us. Alongside this, I'm also the EDI champion for Women in Property Southwest, and my background, academic background, is in sociology, focusing on equality and human rights, which intersects quite closely with the ideas of social value.
Fantastic, Katie. SME yourself, talking to other SMEs, and that's incredibly valuable. Charlotte, perhaps you'd introduce yourself as well.
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Charlotte Gascoyne. I have over 15 years experience in the language service industry. So having worked across a range of roles spanning from operational delivery, strategic development and stakeholder engagement. I'm currently the head of sustainability and ESG at an organisation called DALS, which is based in Manchester. And it's an organisation committed to driving positive change through language access. So DALS is the UK leading language service provider in the UK, delivering over 15,000 bookings a day in more than 500 languages, including British Sign Language. And we support over 250 public sector organisations, including NHS trusts, councils and central government, helping them overcome that critical language challenge through face-to-face video, telephone interpreting, as well as written translations. So in my role, I lead the integration of sustainability and social value across all areas of our operations. And we really believe in that meaningful impact. It comes from inclusive practices, strategic partnerships and community-led initiatives. Nice to see everyone today.
Well, that's fantastic. And finally, but not least, Michael Crook. Michael, I've known you for a while, and it's great to have you on the panel because you have so much advice and great expertise as well, having worked across the sector, engaging and commissioning and working with large organisations. Michael, tell us more about yourself and your journey.
Yeah, so I'm Mike Crook. I'm the head of strategic procurement at STAR, and also the social value lead. So just to let people know about STAR first, if you don't already know, we're a public sector organisation hosted by Trafford Council, and we are a shared service, sort of procurement service for 6 councils, 4 in GM, Trafford, Rochdale, Stockport and Tameside, and 2 in Liverpool City region, which is St Helens and Knowsley. We've been going since 2012, no, maybe 2014, sorry, I joined around 2016. And yeah, I think we've been on a long journey with social value for the last probably 10 years plus. I'll go into a little bit more detail, sort of within the panel session, but we were an early adopter of social value in 2019, of using the portal, increasing the weighting, and using the TOMS system. So yeah, we've been in this for quite a while now. So yeah, we do have quite a bit of experience and sort of knowledge to share.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Mike. So we're going to just go on a little journey. And I think because all of you come from such a varied backgrounds and have so many different experiences, I'm really looking forward to hearing your answers to my hopefully not awful interrogation. So I suppose the first question is, how do you reach out to SMEs to encourage them to take those first steps on their social value journey, especially delivering outcomes that have internal capability, things they're able to do, and where they have internal expertise that they can actually provide. But Mike, can I start with you?
Yeah, of course. I think to start at a fairly high level, and I'll get into more detail of the how, but you've got the new Procurement Acts, you've got the Social Value Acts, you've got the National Procurement Policy Statements, all have got key themes through them around using SMEs, using local provision. So we need to maximise the use of those sort of acts and policies to make sure that we're applying within the rules some sort of local sort of slant on procurement. When I'm talking about SMEs, I think really in STAR at the moment we're really trying to focus on the micro, the small, the VCFSE, the charity. I think some SMEs are quite big and quite capable. So STAR has a great reputation for local spend. We were around 80% last year in GM retained. Some of the councils were between 50 and 60%. I think Stockport, to name them, were probably one of the highest. And yeah, the real key thing for us is how do we engage? How do we get for those really micro, small organisations? And I think to start with, I think some very straightforward things like simplifying the processes. At STAR, we've always had a team of people trying to make it straightforward as possible, making the tender documentation easy to read. And I think being a shared service also helps engage with suppliers better because they have the same process for 6 different councils, so they're more familiar with the documentation. I think early engagement, I'm probably coming on more to a bit more detail now. Early engagement is probably key. Early market engagement, making sure that we have a STAR sort of engagement protocol. We need to make sure that we understand who the suppliers are and make sure that we have that ability to actually, sort of communicate to the suppliers around exactly what the councils want around social value. And I think more recently we've provided quite a lot of training sessions. We've always provided training to suppliers, but more recently we've done more collaboratively with our sort of counterparts. So we've worked with the FSB, the Federation of Small Businesses, and also worked with the local Grove clubs in LCR and Greater Manchester. And that collaborative approach is much, much better, I think, in terms of we're all working towards the same objectives. It's great because we've got Grove Hub providing bidding advice, STAR on the social value. We include the council department, so we've put on several sessions, making sure that we engage with the suppliers to make sure we're reaching out so they know exactly what that needs to take place. And I think what those sessions have kind of demonstrated is that we need to do a bit of myth busting. I think that the fact that you're engaging early allows you to sort of demonstrate to the market and suppliers, those SMEs, that it is a real opportunity. It is real. I think essentially you just need to make sure you're giving them a proper, like almost a leg up, making it an even field, so that they can compete with the tier ones and tier twos. We meet with small suppliers. You look at the TOMs straight away. You can almost see match, across to the TOMs. They're already they're already employing local people. They're already training the staff. They're already low carbon because they're in the local area. It's very easy for them to demonstrate quickly exactly what they are delivering in terms of those TOMs. I think the last thing I just want to mention, and we've also looking at a sort of a low value spend project at the moment, which is again designed specifically at trying to engage with those SMEs. We're working with the FSB, a company called Nomia, and essentially, it's a platform that we've got nearly 900 to 1,000 SMEs on at the moment. And a lot of them are those micro sole traders, small organizations. And essentially, we have a platform now where we are posting opportunities around. It's got a bit of AI in the background, and we can reach out to those providers to kind of make sure that they've got the opportunity to bid for council. And it's opened up the market. It's a pilot at the moment, but the early signs are that it's enabling us to engage with some of those smaller sectors.
Thank you, Mike. I mean, you seem to be using all the right words here. We've got collaboration, you're giving support, you're keeping it simple, and you're reaching out to where they are in place. And you've used the word AI already. That's really impressive. What I'm going to do, I'm going to move on. I've got probably an adjunct little question, but I want to move on straight away to Charlotte. Right, Katie, because you sit in the middle, because you're giving out contracts, you're probably commissioning and working with, but also you're on that supply chain on the other side as well. And I suppose that puts you in a quite interesting position. So really, how do you encourage your supply chain to take those first steps? And how have you found the journey yourself when being on supply chains with the help that you've had as well, Charlotte?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, the majority of our supply chain is those very micro businesses. It's self-employed freelancers. So we have over 10,000 self-employed freelancers that we work with who are interpreters and translators. So from our perspective, from a supplier's perspective, we began our social value journey recognising the strengths that are already embedded in our organisation. So we had apprenticeships within the organisation. We had a great training and development programme in place with our workforce. We do community-based recruitment. So it's all of those fabulous freelance linguists who are based in the communities in which we supply language services to. So it supports inclusive employment and language access. So I guess it's about encouraging other SMEs to start by identifying, first of all, what is social value and understanding that, and then identifying and logging what they do well. And from our perspective, we have partnered with the social value portal, so we could map all of the great things that we were doing and those strengths to the TOMS framework. So that's how we went about doing it.
That's super. And again, you're talking about amplifying what you do best. You're talking about being an exemplar to those on your supply chain. You're reaching into the communities, to those small micro businesses, which I think is brilliant. And you're helping educate them from your own experience. So I think that's great advice and a great example of how to bring those smaller micro businesses along. So, Katie, can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, of course. So being an SME ourselves, we fall into the category, which is probably quite a recurrent theme in this conversation, in that we're an SME that we're already delivering social value, but just not tracking or reporting on it. So when I was able to come into my role and have a look at all the previous activities we're doing and having apprentices working on our projects, employing locally, putting spend back into the economy, school engagement, there's loads of different activities. It's almost like answering this question in two parts. There are first steps for some SMEs who are completely new to social value and understanding how to track and deliver it, but there are those who are already delivering and just need to understand the TOMS framework a little bit and how to report on it. And not to sound too much like a plug, but there are incredible resources if it is on the social value portal or other different platforms that support you with social value. They normally have a news and insight sections that break down legislation and provide advice in 2 to 5 minute reads, which is for someone who doesn't have the time or a social value lead within the company. They're incredible resources to just help you utilize and understand what you're already doing and making those first steps, so to speak, in reporting on it. But we've had some really great engagement this year so far, as an example, with micro businesses in our supply chain who are delivering social value alongside us. And being in construction, we had a great example of finding a local community group in a residential area that volunteer their own time and book annual leave off their jobs to come tend a community garden for the well-being of the residents, and being able to talk to our supply chain partners who are ground workers who would bring a digger in to help unearth the ground so they can plant easier, and saving them a few days of manual labour themselves. It's a really obvious impact that you're having on the community, but also involving the much smaller companies and doing that journey with them in terms of social value.
Katie, what a great example. You know, collaborating with social enterprises, charities, local groups. That's something small businesses do really well and are more able to at a local level. So simplification, proportional, doable. And again, great piece of advice. Social value portal, lots of incredibly superb, valuable information from there. And of course, there are other models. There are other supply chain school is another one, and there are plenty out there. As opposed to maybe 10 years ago, what we have is a much broader ecosystem where there's education to be had if you look for it. So thank you for reminding everyone about that. Mike, I just wanted to go back. I mean, from Katie and Charlotte, what we've got from how they deploy themselves in the community is the idea of proportionality. That has to be a watchword in commissioning, doesn't it, Michael?
Yeah, 100%. It's always got to be proportionate, always got to be relevant, to the project itself. You can't ask for the moon on a stick every time. It's just not realistic. To be a little bit controversial, could you argue, because we do social value from 50k upwards, we use the portal, and could you argue that it creates a bit of a barrier in certain circumstances? We've secured over 550 million social value since 2019. The TOMS, the social value portal, it absolutely works. It's brought us a huge way along. We've got loads of outcomes and loads of scope for delivering. It's just we're doing a bit of a root and branch social value review at the moment. We're kind of looking at the different sort of cohort sizes of contracts, and we look between 50 and 100k. Probably out that 550 million plus, only 1% is delivered between that 50 to 100k. So essentially, we've got maybe 200 to 300 projects delivering 1%. Is it worth the extra effort, the time for contract managers, commissioners at the councils, suppliers? The extra work suppliers have to put in. And it kind of, it's sort of what's next for us in terms of that review. Do we need to, is a one size fits all the way forward? Do we need to look at a tiered sort of process? So yeah, we're reviewing it at the moment. It comes back to that NOMIA pilot. Is local spend social value, and be having a more inclusive, more diverse supply chain at that lower level, possibly, yeah.
So Mike, what I get from that, and it's not something I haven't heard before, as you'd understand, being at the FSB. We're representing all those smaller micro businesses and the self-employed. Is really about, it's not all quantitative. A lot of what these small companies are doing is qualitative. How do you measure that, right? How do you get that in? Can you get that into a TOMS framework or one of the established frameworks? And I would say that we're on a journey. And it's something that we need to be able to talk about. Can we measure it? Perhaps we can. We maybe need other ways of doing that. But it's really important, because if we're not, we're missing out on a whole load of social value that's being created from micro enterprises. And I think, the figures that you've given us sort of really highlight that is something that I think everyone in the audience should really, really think about. What's next? So thank you for that. That was really valuable. So following on from that, my next question is that we've learned that education and collaboration are really important to continuous improvement. And as Mike said, it's led them to start developing new innovative ways of looking at delivering social value for small businesses. Good contract management, right, is really important. And I'd be interested to know, what are some of the mistakes you've seen in SME commissioning, and that we need to avoid? So I'm going to reverse this around. I'm going to throw this at Katie from her end, and then we'll move our way back to Mike at the end. So Katie, can I start with you? What have you seen, in terms of mistakes, bad commissioning, whether it's come from others to you, or maybe things that you've done where you thought, okay, we might do that differently next time?
I think one that stands out, and this is speaking from my own experience this year, is not allowing enough time to coordinate an activity before starting the tender. So we quite often, what I found is that once you sign a contract, very quickly the turnaround to starting on site is sometimes within a matter of weeks. And at the tender stage, if you've made the commitment to, say, hire someone that's long-term unemployed for the whole duration of the contract, then you're not giving yourself enough time to coordinate possibly with local networks or job centres or community groups that might be able to help you achieve that. And already you're putting yourself in a deficit for achieving that goal. So I would always advise other SMEs to give yourself a bit of time to coordinate with maybe multiple different people that could help you achieve your target before starting on your project.
So that's
sorry. In terms of commissioners, what I find with reading tenders and what they're asking of us, I think a key point is to be clear from the very start of the tender stage. Is when you're asking a lot from SMEs in terms of delivering social value, if it's obvious that the social value is important to the commissioner and in the tender question, it gives SMEs, I think, the confidence that their efforts will be recognised and allow them to plan the delivery successfully, rather than feeling like they're being asked to meet unrealistic and unclear expectations.
So pre-market engagement, early time, clarity from commissioners. And one thing you'd mentioned there again is collaboration between different groups. So
yeah,
have you got a great example where SMEs and social enterprises and community groups have got together and delivered something quite stellar?
Yeah, I do find, and I think for those who are starting off on their journey and don't really know how to best deliver social value, even just going to your local authority, there's already great employment and skill departments set up, and they have initiative and connections with schools and youth groups within the area, or those who are in need. And already there's collaboration happening across maybe your own industry or amongst other professionals to collaborate and go into schools and show younger people all the possible pathways and careers available to them. That's a great collaboration that I have seen, especially within Bristol. we're very fortunate to have the Bristol Property Inclusion Charter, loads of different committees, the FBE, BPAA, Women in Property, all collaborating together alongside the council to really give useful insights about the careers and inspire the next generation.
Brilliant. That is superb. And again, it lovely keeps up with our whole theme of this conference around the power of collaboration. So, Charlotte, so that's some question to you. Mistakes you've seen in commissioning, what you think we need to try and avoid, and then a really good example that you've seen of collaboration between enterprise community groups and SMEs that you thought, wow.
Yeah, I guess a common mistake could be treating social value as a tick box. So it's not the commissioning body, but it's the SMEs or the suppliers bidding for it. Over-promising without understanding the reporting requirements from a supplier's perspective, or commissioners setting quite rigid KPIs that don't reflect local realities. So it all links into that collaboration. It's not engaging SMEs early on in the procurement stage. I mean, we've benefited from being involved in pre-contact discussions, which allows us to shape commitments that do align with our strengths, so that anything that we do commit to, we can be ensured that we're delivering on it.
So really, sorry, Charlotte. I always have a terrible habit of jumping in. You carry on.
No, I was going to go on to the next section, so you carry on.
No, please, no, you carry on. It's your here to talk.
And so the next part, was it about the relationship that we have with VCFSEs, or examples where we've seen examples happen in practice? Is that where we were going to?
That's it, really good. Just maybe one great example where you've seen, this sort of collaboration between social enterprise community groups that you've witnessed in some of your projects.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, it would be the collaboration that we have ourselves with VCFSEs. So, I mean, from our perspective, we love working with VCFSEs and charities. So we identify in the relevant community a VCFSE that may need the requirements of our services, but they don't have the cost to be able to afford language services. So we would provide them with telephone interpreting for free. So we're essentially removing those cost barriers and enabling those grassroots organisations to serve the communities more effectively, improving access to their services and making sure that they're being inclusive as possible. We do have some great partnerships in place with regards to charity organisations. The most recent one being with Henry, so a charity that supports families to give children a healthy and happy start. So we're about to embark on a fabulous partnership with them. And then in relation to where we see the impact, because it's great doing all of these initiatives, but so what? So from our perspective, it's understanding that impact so you can articulate what you're doing well and whether it's a success to the communities. So we've had great feedback from the VCFSEs that we've partnered with. So a food bank in the northeast that we supply language services to have been able to conduct welfare advice for their clients and provide general service advice. And without the addition of the language services, they wouldn't be able to cover it with their current volunteers. So we've been able to enhance the dialogue they're having. Another charity that we supply language services to has been able to support a number of people who were victims of domestic abuse and people seeking asylum who've needed support to understand the process. And they've been able to get a clear understanding of the people's needs, which has enabled them to receive the care that they do need. I mean, I could go on forever. So, I mean, from our perspective, we're really proud of that and what we see as success in that collaboration between organisations of VCFSEs.
So that's brilliant. That's a really fabulous and exciting example. I love the idea of you're using your core capability, your core knowledge, your core expertise, and putting it out there so that those organisations can reach those communities they would never be able to reach. I just think that's superb. I like the idea again, around all the hurdle or that some companies do, or some SMEs can face, where they're over-promising beyond their capability. that's a really important danger that you pointed out. And then, of course, commissioners who are being far too rigid in their KPIs in ensuring that do not reflect the capability of the audience they're pitching to in commissioning. I think that's something that we have to take on board. Mike, I'll come back to you as well on this question around the do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
What things you need to avoid.
Yeah, I think some of it. I think some of it. This probably resonates with what Katie was saying. I think treating the process like a tick box exercise, adding toms in, putting the portal into the process, and then suppliers just picking toms. I think they'll go for the big numbers, the employment areas, but it won't be impactful, and it's not adding value. And I think there needs to be a two-pronged approach. I think the councils need to be clear about exactly what they want. So within the STAR documentation, we've mapped all the TOMs to the council's corporate priorities. We have a supplier engagement document, which essentially lays out all the priority cohorts and themes, the care leavers, veterans, long-term unemployed, and it also signposts them to the correct contact in the councils to make sure that they're fully aware of how to deliver. And on the flip side, like Katie was saying, if the councils aren't providing that information, you need to challenge back and make sure that you're asking what do you want. Don't just pick the high items. Don't play the game. It's got to be impactful. And I think if that doesn't take place, you end up with some big figures and, like you say, very little or low impact. I've got some other examples if we've got time. I'm conscious.
Well, I mean, go on. I'm happy to let you carry on talking.
Yeah, so things around inconsistent contract management. I think it's one thing securing social value, but another thing actually delivering it in practice. I think we've done a lot of work with the portal, the commissioners, suppliers, around looking at outreach programs over the last 12 months to make sure anyone that's got low or no delivery, we're contacting them, asking them why. And quite often it is that there's a training requirement that they're struggling with using the portal. No suppliers ever refused. It's quite often just they need a bit of a nudge, and we've seen over the last 12 to 18 months delivery of social value increase quite considerably. Again, not to be unsympathetic to the suppliers, but making sure that they validate the data in detail. I know it can be quite onerous. It's got to be a right balance between us not asking for too much, but us having enough information so that we can tick it off as complete and that we can actually measure impact. So the more information we have on an employed person, the easier it is for us to engage, to sort of measure impact rather. And I think some of the other obvious ones are, like we've said before, over-egging it, asking for too much. It's got to be proportionate and relevant. And I think in terms of good examples around collaboration, I think that again, it's kind of been spoken about around those relationships. I mean, we're huge in collaboration, being a shared service. We're really expert. We consider ourselves to be experts and very good at it, but there's still more that can be done. I think better relationships between different organisations, and like I said, I know you said these are tech in place, but third sector to third sector, making sure there's a huge amount of resource and knowledge. Why can't they come together more? Which it might happen, but we don't see it happening enough. So that they can share knowledge, share skills, they can jointly bid. So that they can compete against bigger contractors, and then also some of the tier 1s and 2s. Why can't we harness their social value? So that they can support the third sector, rather than having a QS, accountant, solicitor painting a community room, which is impactful if that's what the community needs. But if their time was spent from a tier 1 helping some of the third sector, providing advice, professional services, support to the business to help them develop and grow, I think it'd be much more impactful. And just lastly to say, brokerage systems are starting to become sort of tried and tested in the STAR councils. Stockport have had Match My Project for a couple of years, and a couple of the other councils are looking at brokerage at the moment and looking at options. It's a great platform that can help potentially sort of broker those kind of relationships. And Stockport, it already had, it's already delivered multiple community projects and provided many skills and works opportunities for within the borough.
God, those are great examples, brilliant examples, and really important. Shared knowledge, shared skills, coming together in sort of collaborative groups to do some of the bigger contracts. That is really important. The contract management, of course, as you said, is everything. Good contract management and support from tier 1s and 2s to those smaller companies, and making sure that they're actually giving value. As Charlotte said, a really great example of where they're not running around, as you said, painting rooms and classrooms. They're using their core skills and proficiency, getting out there and using that to enhance what happens in the community. And I think that's a really, really important message. You don't go and build a garden if you've got a really superb core skill the rest of the community can use, that you're providing professionally. Go out and sell that as part of delivering social value. Really, really important. This is super. Right. So I've got another question for you. So the TOM structure, by its nature, is quantitative. Well, you've touched on this, Michael. About the hurdles as you go further down the supply chain. But social value, as I said before, is very qualitative in many, and especially on those smaller projects for place-based impact and micro businesses. And we've heard some brilliant stories in our awards ceremonies in previous conferences where we've seen those small micro businesses and social enterprises do absolutely a magnitude of amazing social value that wouldn't have been done before in their communities. But the challenge now, as we go forward, is how do we tie the qualitative and the quantitative together? And this time, I'm going to start with Mike, and we'll go through Charlotte and then Kate.
Yeah. So again, so at STAR, we don't just use the minimum 10%. We go above and beyond. So it's 20% weighting in most of social. That's our target. So 10% is on the TOMs and 10% is on the quality side. So suppliers have to clearly demonstrate exactly how they're going to do it. It goes into some quite detail who you're going to deal with at the council. So there's quite a detailed question around how they're going to deliver. And I think, again, not to keep repeating, but it also links back, I think, to consistent contract management, ensuring delivery is evidenced and takes place in line with what was promised in the tender. And again, it has to be a flexible process as well, because things change throughout the life of a contract, council priorities, the supplier circumstances. So I think, like you said, the quality element, and again, obviously, early engagement is key. Understanding who the suppliers are out there and the SMEs, and also being able to transfer exactly what the councils want. And there needs to be a good sort of handover from procurement to contract management / commissioning, making sure the roles and responsibilities are clear, so that there's that, we don't just say, oh, here's your supplier, sort of throw it to the commissioner. There needs to be a clear sort of handover process.
Excellent. That's a big list. That's great. And so, Charlotte, can I come to you on this one as well?
Yeah, of course. So, of course, the TOMS framework does give a robust structure for measuring outcomes. But I guess where the real magic comes in is when the numbers meet your narrative, and I guess it's about how you're articulating what you're doing and that impact to whether it's an individual or a community. It's great that we have all of the commitments that we make and that we've delivered externally validated by the social value portal, because it does give you that credibility when you're talking to the commissioning bodies and new clients. We put that, I guess, the narrative around it, because not everyone is au fait and familiar with the terminology of the TOMs. So this is where you're your narrative comes into that. So it's saying we've delivered X amount and this was by doing X, Y, Z, and the impact of that has been this. So it's kind of that dual reporting model, really. So it's making sure that you've got the metrics and the deliverables, but you're giving meaningful case studies or examples or verbatim feedback on the initiatives that you have delivered.
Brilliant. I think, you know, the storytelling is really important, isn't it? In the end, it's not all numbers in a spreadsheet. It's about real living impact that you can see, that you can touch, and that people can tell you about with emotion. And we've seen a lot of that, especially with some of the wonderful award winners that we've had in the past. Katie, can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, I think obviously both quantitative and qualitative have their own merits. As you said, with storytelling being one of the most effective ways to demonstrate the social impact that you're having within a community, layering up the description of the activity with photos, feedback, and briefly just summarising what the benefit has been to that community or individual person is brilliant. But then also bringing in that data side of things, setting your own benchmarks, analysing your strengths and highlighting areas for improvement. The numbers alone don't capture that human element or the transformational impact that you're having, but together it adds depth and context to what you're delivering in the community. So I do feel that combining these two together gives commissioners and communities more of a full picture about what social value is, what was delivered, and what difference is actually being made. And I think a really nice example as well is that we've got a project where we've signed up to about 16 different TOMs, and we're able to evidence it through using the equivalent monetary value of what that is adding to the local area, but capturing that with the photographic evidence and storytelling. And I find it is combining the numbers and the stories is giving a really strong understanding of what we're doing and showing that scale and impact specifically for that project and the community really well.
That's a great example, you know, and I love that phrase, combining the numbers and the stories. I think that's, well, I'm writing that down. I might use that myself. That's brilliant. Perfect. So what a bunch of seriously excellent examples of how SMEs can work together, what we look for in the future. But I think the big question at this conference for this huge cohort of small and micro businesses, and then how we move forward with social values, how might we move social value from compliance in procurement, which is really important, to the cultural change in the way an SME delivers its products and services. So it's inherently looking right from the beginning at how do we do what we do, right, and deliver social value, even if we're not on a TOMS framework. Okay, how do we ensure that social value continues long after our contract period on a particular commission contract is over? You know, how do we avoid the cliff face, and how do we ensure that there's going to be legacy left years from now? I mean, that's got to be that's got to be a really important imperative for commissioners as well as our movement, but also for those small and micro businesses. So I know this is a really difficult question. It's a really big one, but how do you think we might move towards embedding that sort of idea of social value in every commercial decision that we make in small businesses and medium-sized and micro businesses? And then the other thing, actually, what incentives might those commissioning those contracts add in to ensure that that change occurs? And Katie, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to go reverse this one.
Yeah, it's almost three parts to that question, isn't it? In terms of moving from compliance to culture, I think it's first to recognise that a lot of SMEs and especially micro businesses don't necessarily have a social value lead or a budget to use platforms, and also social value can take up a lot of time as well. So recognizing and understanding that it's a priority to find what works for your business. And I mean, ourselves as a business, we use a portal for one of our projects, but for the rest of them, I track them on an Excel sheet, which equally does work really well. So it doesn't need to be an overwhelming and stressful challenge on a company budget and time. And once you find what works for you and what you're good at, it can be quite a simple, natural journey in moving from compliance to culture, because most likely you are already delivering social value. And then I guess continued legacy. I think with SMEs, and what we find is being based locally, you naturally have a strong physical presence and ties in the community, whether or not your office is just based a couple miles away from where you're working, or members of your team grew up in the area on the same street or went to the same school. You naturally have such an advantage of a physical presence, and it's a great opportunity, especially in construction, because most of our contracts last for at least a year, and you can really make connections with the community and have longevity to the support you're providing them, to really avoid that cliff face, so to speak, of just tick boxing, have one engagement with them and moving on. Some things might naturally come to an end, and then others you might finish the project and think that you've got such a strong relationship and you can see that you're making such a huge difference that it works for them and your business to continue that long after you've left.
That's fantastic. Now, I'm cognizant of time, and we do want to bring some questions in at the end. So if Charlotte and straight away, and then Mike after, could sort of answer that horrendously long question
very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, echo what Katie said. It's about embedding social value into your culture, recognizing what you're doing well and continuing that. It's not just about delivering social value and a tick in the box, it's about living it. So, you know, if you do have that employees from the local community, you're already supporting that local economy. If you've got the option of volunteering, I'm sure that even if you reached out to your colleagues and your workforce and understand what people were doing, there'll be loads of people volunteering, which is so impactful. I think in terms of the longevity, I mean, creating partnerships in itself isn't a tick in the box, is it? Partnerships last for a long time because that's the whole purpose of it. If that partnership works, continue with it. And from a commissioner's perspective, you know, offer long-term contracts if you can. You know, not just a one-year contract with a considerable amount of VAS around social value, where someone's got to quickly do all this and build the partnerships and do everything they possibly can. It's about that longevity. It's about the journey of social value. It's about that true delivering impact into the future, essentially.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, yeah, really, really important. You know, it's a question that comes up all the time. But Mike, what's your thoughts on this? You know, legacy, you know, delivering legacy, long-term impact over time horizons, really important.
Yeah, so I'll start with the first question around you know, how do we change the culture? And I think Star's probably fairly mature in that sense. Like I say, it's not just compliance, I don't think anymore. And we build 20% in, which is above and beyond the 10% minimum requirement. That's compliance. Star's journey started like 10 years ago, and probably even longer in terms of the social value. And I think the most significant change was around 2019. We were one of the early adopters of the portal and the TOMS. We had the 20% raised at that point. And at that point, social value was still an unfamiliar phrase. People didn't really know what it meant, you know, what the roles and responsibilities were. Most key stakeholders hated it. People hated us for bringing it in. You know, some of the procurement staff, the commissioners, the suppliers, were, you know, not hated it, but found it really difficult, I think. And I think now we're at the position where, you know, it's clear and everyone understands social value. I think it's brought the sector along massively. You know, we've got a clear, I think it's key to having like a, you know, the measurement, and I think the sort of clear method of measurement and success really helps. And I think winning hearts and minds is key more than anything as well. Like it's already been mentioned, successfully demonstrating impact, using real life case studies to bring it to life. That really helps some of our commissioners and contract managers. And in terms of continuing success, again, I agree. I think if it's impactful, I mean, we need to look and look at our processes still and tweak and change. But if it's impactful, so just give an example of bringing someone into employment. If it's someone who would have gained employment anyway, it's had a very small impact. But if someone who has a barrier or has been long-term unemployed and they are brought into employment, I think that impact goes well into the future, well beyond the contract. They may never have worked again if no one would have helped them. And quite often it is fairly straightforward. They need some kind of support surrounding their sort of work. And I think that's how you get sort of impact into the future. And lastly, on incentives, again, I think the performance, the good news stories, the case studies, everyone's seeing making a difference. I think that acts as an almost an incentive. And in terms of the commissioning world, most jobs are relating to helping people. Whether it's adults, children, social care, public health. So really, it kind of goes hand in hand with what they're trying to achieve through the job. So I think it kind of helps support their role in general. And like you say, I think if a person from a supplier side, I think if a person's been brought into employment off the back of after struggling to gain employment, I think they're so grateful. I think they'll be more loyal. I think you're more likely to retain that employer. I think the council's more likely to retain that person as a good resident. So I think it has such a benefit effect. I think those are some of the incentives. I think.
Fantastic, Mike. I think absolutely we ought to be looking now at what the impact is. So what we do and what the impact over time is really, really important. So I'm going to quickly try and get in a couple of questions because I do apologise to everyone who's on this on the feed. I wish I'd been able to get more in, but the first question relates to the benefit and cost to small businesses. Stuart Marsh asks, as an employee-owned SME, in order to compete with our large organisations, we have to operate with lean profit margins. How can we compete without the resources of our competitors? So how does he do it without the resources? Mike, go on.
Yeah, I think so. Within GM and LCR, there is free resources that are available around. I think when we have events and the Greater Manchester Growth Hub attend, there is free bidding support and advice. I think you just need to be aware of what's available. Obviously, make sure you go into these engagement events to sort of try and give yourself the leg up. If you see a pre-market engagement event, it's not just information gathering all the time. Quite often, particularly if it's with Star, we're trying to engage with a supplier. We're trying to tell you what we need to try and almost help support. And like you say, reach out to the councils as well. Make sure you're asking. And yeah, I know it's difficult. And like you said, possibly maybe opening up to wider similar organisations, knowledge sharing with other similar type organisations. What's the art of the possible? Yeah.
And Katie, Charlotte, I mean, please do come in. Have you got any advice on this particular one? Operating with a lean profit margins.
I mean, yeah, go on, Katie.
Sorry, we're quite similar as so we work within a particular range of tenders, so ranging from say 2 million to 10 million for the project sizes, and there'll be larger companies, maybe more established tier 2 or sometimes tier 1s that will come in and bid for this work. And quite confidently I can say within our business we have 2 apprentices, which is brilliant, but they're working on other projects, so we might only be able to put 1 apprentice on it for half the duration, and a much larger company can come in and go, well, we're going to put 5 apprentices on this scheme, and already you think that's going to make them look so much more favourable to the commissioners, and we can't compete with that. But in my own experience, I spend a lot of time researching what the community needs, what's the local authorities' agenda, what their focus is, giving some really good examples of we are an SME, but look at how well we are doing. And with confidence, we will 100% deliver on the commitments we make to you. And I know it's quite difficult, but you really need to try and not feel the pressure and competitiveness, and put down commitments you know you can deliver.
Wow, that's really great advice. Charlotte, can you follow that?
Yeah, I mean, it's very quickly, isn't it? Don't overcommit and deliver. Proportionality, looking at the size of the contract that you're bidding for. It's great that you're in the position as an employee-owned SME to be bidding for larger contracts and competing with the larger organisations. But that's where it's that the pre-engagement activity and ensuring that from the Commissioner's perspective they are taking proportionality into consideration. We've looked at 10% social value, 20% social value. I can imagine some larger organisations do throw in a huge amount to be able to win the bid, 50%, but it links into articulating what you do well. It's having the evidence of what you do well. It's understanding the local communities in which you're going to be supplying into. And it's hopefully not just, as we've said, looking at the figures, it's looking at how what is the impact of that you're going to do.
I think, that those are all really brilliant bits of advice. And I think, and it's a great question, because it's a common question. How do we compete with those larger companies? And I think that's the way to do it. That was absolutely super advice. And Stuart, I hope you got something out of that. Now, I just want to check on our time, because I think I wanted to get some more questions in, but I don't think that's going to be possible. So as we wind up, I hope that everyone found that incredibly rich, and I want to thank Charlotte, Kate, and Mike for a really informative session for our SMEs. That was absolutely beautiful, and I hope everyone who was on our webinar today, on our call, goes away with something to think about, perhaps as you bid, as you begin your own social value journey, or where you are on its maturity. Hopefully you've got something from our session today. I want to thank you all for being here, and especially our three fabulous panel members, to Charlotte, to Katie, to Michael. For those of you who are coming tomorrow, hopefully you'll be able to find us, and that would be, and we'll hopefully follow on from there in an environment where we can actually have a chat, which would be lovely. So at this stage, I want to say, wish you all very well, and say enjoy the rest of today and tomorrow. And thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Thanks.